This place is a disgrace with you here." The words fell from Conrad Sterling's mouth like shards of glass, each one cutting into the air and into the quiet dignity of the woman standing before him. Conversations at nearby tables froze. A fork clinked against a plate, and then silence spread like a cold front across the glittering dining room of Celestine. Before I take you into what happened next, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. If you believe in dignity and justice, like this video and subscribe so we can keep sharing stories that challenge the powerful and give voice to the unseen. Now, let's step back to that February night in Chicago, when a single sentence lit a fire that would not be put out. Laila Brooks, 29 years old, black, a single mother raising a 9-year-old daughter named Maya, stood at table 12 with a tray balanced perfectly on one hand. The snow outside blew in spirals along Michigan Avenue. But in here, under gold chandeliers and the soft hum of a Michelin-starred kitchen, the temperature had just dropped to freezing. Sterling, one of the wealthiest tech magnates in America, sat like he owned not just the table but the air everyone breathed. His reputation had preceded him. The sharp tongue, the casual cruelty, the way he treated service staff as though they were props. Laila had been told by the floor manager, Daniel Pierce, that she would be covering his table after a colleague called out sick. She had nodded, said I understand, and meant it. In her years at Celestine, she had learned how to carry herself like the marble pillars that held the place up, poised, unshaken. She placed the water glasses gently, naming the menu's first tasting course with the precision and care her job required. That was when Sterling's eyes raked over her uniform, her skin, her presence, and the first remark came, "I didn't come here for servers like you." It was not whispered. It was not for her alone. It was pitched to be overheard, to spread like a stain. Somewhere near the back, Vanessa Holt, the senior server who had never hidden her jealousy, smirked into her wine service tray. She had told others more than once that Laila didn't fit Celestine's image. Now she watched as that judgment was weaponized by the richest man in the room. Laila's training said stay calm. Her mother's voice in her head said, hold your dignity. Maya's picture in her apron pocket said, don't let them see you small. So she inhaled quietly and said, I'm here to serve you, sir, not to be judged. A few diners blinked, unsure whether to look away or look longer. Sterling leaned back, scoffing, and glanced at the couple seated beside him, the Thorntons, another pair of regulars known for their cold politeness. This restaurant, he said slowly, could be bought in a second. But look at what it's serving. His gaze lingered on Laila like she was the punchline to a joke no one dared laugh at. She steadied herself and reached for the wine list. Our chef recommends the Pinot Noir from Oregon with your short rib course, she said. But before she could finish, Sterling cut her off. Get me someone else. This is unacceptable. Daniel, who had been moving toward the table, stepped in with a calm voice. Mr. Sterling, Laila is one of our best servers. If something isn't to your liking, we'll adjust. Sterling's lips curled. Best? In what neighborhood? Certainly not here. That was when it happened. Laila placed the wine list down, met his eyes, and in a voice that was even but carried to every corner of the room, said, Mr. Sterling, you can buy this restaurant, but you can't buy my dignity. The words hung there, unshaken by the opulence, unafraid of the silence. A phone at a nearby table, almost instinctively, tilted up to record. Sterling's jaw twitched. Vanessa's smirk faltered into something unreadable. And Javier Morales, the bartender with the steady eyes, froze mid-polish of a glass. The pause felt like a held breath, the kind before a crowd decides whether to erupt or recoil. Sterling's fingers tapped the table once, twice. We'll see about that, he muttered. though now his voice had lost its audience. Laila didn't flinch. She continued the service, course by course, as though nothing had happened. But inside, she could feel the tremor of what she'd just done. She didn't know yet that the recording was already making its way onto social media. She didn't know that within hours. The phrase "you can't buy my dignity" would be quoted, shared, and hashtagged across millions of screens. She only knew that when you are pushed into a corner, you either shrink or you stand. And tonight, she had chosen to stand. Sterling finished his meal in brittle silence. Vanessa whispered to a nearby busser, "She'll regret that." But Laila, moving between tables with the same care she had at the start of the night, wasn't thinking about regret. She was thinking about Maya's homework waiting at home, about the rent due next week, about the fact that for the first time in a long time, she had said exactly what needed to be said, no matter who was listening. Laila didn't sleep much that night. After she tucked Maya into bed with a kiss and a whispered, "Mommy's fine." She sat at the small kitchen table in their Bronzeville apartment, a mug of chamomile cooling in front of her. The snow outside muffled the city's usual hum, and the quiet let memories creep in, the ones she usually kept locked away. She thought of herself at 12, the only black girl in her honors English class, raising her hand to answer a question about To Kill a Mockingbird and hearing a boy mutter, "Of course she likes that book." She thought of the time a teacher assumed her essay was plagiarized because, in his words, "This level of vocabulary isn't what I'd expect from you." She had learned young that dignity wasn't given. It was guarded. By 16, she was winning writing competitions, dreaming of journalism school, determined to tell stories that cut through lies. But at 18, life shifted. A college acceptance letter sat unopened on her desk the same week a pregnancy test turned positive. Maya's father promised to be there, and then wasn't. Laila's parents helped as much as they could, but their own struggles meant Laila had to work. She cleaned houses, stocked shelves, waited tables, always chasing rent and groceries. Through every job, she carried herself the same way, upright, eyes forward, words measured but warm. By the time she landed at Celestine 2 years ago, she was no stranger to the way some diners looked at her. The long pause before speaking, the overpronounced miss that carried more than politeness. Vanessa Holt was the type to smile at those moments, as if confirming a suspicion. Vanessa had seniority, and she guarded it like a throne. She called Laila rookie even after months of perfect service. She'd slide the easier tables to herself, leave the more demanding ones for Laila, and never missed a chance to drop a comment like, "I just hope you can keep up," that winter night, before Sterling arrived. Vanessa had been in the staff room adjusting her lipstick and muttering, "I swear, if I get stuck with the Sterling table, I'm walking out," when Daniel asked her to cover it after a last-minute absence. She feigned a headache. Laila, hearing this, knew what it meant when Daniel turned to her, a chance, but also a test. She said yes without hesitation. Javier Morales had been behind the bar polishing stemware when she passed by on her way to Sterling's table. Javier was steady, mid-30s, with the easy patience of someone who'd weathered worse storms than bad customers. Born in Mexico, he came to Chicago at 19, worked his way up from dishwasher to bartender. He and Laila shared quiet conversations during lulls in service, about Maya's school projects, about his little sister studying nursing, about the dream of one day running a place of their own. He knew what it meant to carry your dignity in rooms that didn't always welcome it. That night, Javier caught the shift in Sterling's voice before most others did. He saw Vanessa lean closer to the Thorntons, whispering something with a smirk. He saw Laila keep her spine straight, and when Sterling's voice cut sharper, "This place is a disgrace with you here." Javier's hands clenched the bar towel. Later, in the staff corridor, he would tell her quietly, I heard what Vanessa said to him before you got there. She told him you were just a token higher. Laila had only nodded, the truth settling heavy but unsurprising. It wasn't the first time Vanessa had tried to undermine her. Once. Vanessa forgot to tell Laila about a last-minute menu change, just to watch her scramble at a table. Another time, she claimed Laila had mixed up orders, though the receipts proved otherwise. But Sterling's insult, paired with Vanessa's whispering, made the night's tension burn hotter. After the confrontation, while Laila finished her shift, she noticed how certain guests looked at her, some with sympathy, others with the kind of curiosity reserved for a spectacle. She pushed through, table to table, her voice steady, the rhythm of service like a heartbeat she refused to let falter. At closing, she slipped into her coat, thanked Daniel for the shift, and walked out into the brittle cold. Bronzeville welcomed her with familiar streetlights and the faint scent of fried chicken from the corner diner. Maya was still awake when she came in, reading under the blanket fort they'd built in the living room. "Did anyone say anything mean to you today?" "Mommy?" Maya asked. Laila smiled softly. "People say things. Baby. But words only hurt if you let them take your power. And we don't give away our power." Maya nodded, satisfied. Those were the moments Laila lived for, the ones where she could teach her daughter strength without bitterness. In the days leading up to that night, life had been the usual balancing act: early mornings packing lunches, late nights reviewing the next week's schedule, calling her landlord to negotiate the rent payment. She carried it all quietly, which was why, when Sterling tried to strip her dignity in front of a room full of strangers, she knew she couldn't let it stand. Her response had been instinct wrapped in years of practice, the steady tone, the unflinching gaze, the choice of words that reminded both him and everyone listening that money could buy a lot, but not everything. Now, as she sat in the dim kitchen, her tea cold, she thought about Javier's warning and Vanessa's smirk. She knew trouble wasn't over. Sterling was a man who didn't take public defiance lightly, especially not from someone he considered beneath him. And Vanessa. Vanessa had just seen her rival hold the room's attention. The combination was dangerous. But Laila had weathered worse. She remembered standing in a grocery store line at 19, a crying baby in her arms, food stamps in her hand, while the man behind her sighed loud enough for everyone to hear. She remembered delivering food to an office where the receptionist took her tip jar and said, "We don't allow those here," even though she'd seen others keep theirs. She had learned to survive, and she had learned that survival sometimes meant standing tall in the face of someone trying to push you down. That night, she rinsed her mug, checked on Maya, and slipped into bed. Sleep came in fragments, each one interrupted by flashes of Sterling's sneer, Vanessa's whisper, Javier's quiet warning. By morning, she resolved to keep doing what she always did: show up, do her job, and protect her peace. But somewhere deep down, she knew something had shifted. Words spoken in the right moment have a way of traveling farther than you ever plan. And hers, "You can't buy my dignity," were already on their way. By the time Laila arrived at Celestine the next evening, the quiet hum of the restaurant had changed into something sharper, almost electric. She didn't know it yet, but while she was making breakfast for Maya that morning, eggs over easy, just the way her daughter liked, a diner's shaky phone video of her exchange with Conrad Sterling had exploded online. 6 million views. Laila's stand was climbing Twitter's trending list like wildfire. The clip was less than 20 seconds long, but it told a whole story. Sterling scornful, "This place is a disgrace with you here," followed by her unflinching, "Mr. Sterling, you can buy this restaurant, but you can't buy my dignity." In the video, you could see the moment the room went silent, and you could see her eyes, steady, unafraid. By noon, Her phone was buzzing non-stop. Old classmates she hadn't heard from in years messaged to say they were proud of her. A college journalism professor she'd never met in person emailed. That was one of the clearest acts of grace under fire I've seen in years. But mixed in with the praise were darker messages. Strangers calling her names, accusing her of chasing attention, telling her to stay in her lane. She ignored most of them. But when she walked past a newsstand on the way to the train, she froze. On the front page of the Chicago Daily was a still image from the video, her hand resting on the wine list, her gaze locked on Sterling. The headline read, "Servers Stand Against Billionaire Sparks National Debate at Celestine." The usual banter between servers was replaced with side glances and low whispers. Daniel Pierce pulled her aside before the shift. "Laila, you should know Sterling called this morning. He's threatening to sue for defamation." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I told him the footage speaks for itself." She nodded, feeling the tension coil in her stomach. "I'm not trying to make trouble." "Daniel," she said, "I just wasn't going to let him strip me down like that." Daniel met her eyes. "You did the right thing. But the fallout's coming. Be ready." Across the room, Vanessa Holt leaned on a high-top table, scrolling through her phone. She looked up just long enough to smirk. Later, in the staff corridor, Laila overheard her telling another server. She wanted this. People like her love the spotlight. The words stung, not because they were true, they weren't, but because they came from someone who knew exactly how hard Laila had worked to stay invisible unless it was about the job. Javier Morales found her in the prep area and handed her a glass of water. "You spoke for all of us last night." He said, "Don't let anyone make you feel bad for that." His voice was steady, the way it always was when he meant every word. That night's crowd was even heavier with well-dressed, watchful faces. A pair of 20-something women in designer coats asked if she could be their server because we saw you online. An older black couple clasped her hand when she poured their wine and said, "Thank you for showing them what dignity looks like." But for every kind glance, there was a hard stare. Customers who had likely read Sterling's version of events in one of the blogs already carrying it, midway through service. Daniel came to her station. "There are reporters outside. Some want a statement." She shook her head. "Not now. I'm working." But the attention was already leaking into her life beyond the restaurant. That night, when she turned the corner to her building, two men with cameras were leaning against the brick wall near her door. "Laila, how does it feel to be America's most famous server?" one called out. She didn't answer, just keyed the lock quickly and shut the door. Inside, Maya was watching cartoons on the couch. "Why are people outside?" "Mommy?" Laila forced a smile. "Because they saw the video of Mommy at work." Maya tilted her head. "Did you sing?" "Not exactly," Laila said, sitting down beside her. She didn't tell her about the anonymous call that had come an hour earlier. A man's voice, low and sharp, saying, "You'll regret this." "Laila." She didn't tell her about the way her hands shook for 10 minutes after hanging up. Instead, she wrapped her arms around her daughter and held her close. The next morning, Evelyn Ward, Celestine's owner, called her in early. Evelyn was a woman who commanded respect without raising her voice, a former chef who knew the value of every person on her team. "I saw the video," she said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "I also saw the garbage Sterling's been feeding to his friends in the press. Don't you worry. No one disrespects my staff and gets away with it." Laila felt a wave of relief, but also fear. Sterling wasn't a man who lost quietly. He's got money. "Evelyn," she said. Evelyn nodded. "So do I. But I've also got truth on my side." By the end of that week, the hashtag Dr. Laila Stand had spawned thousands of posts. Some sharing their own workplace discrimination stories, others calling for boycotts of Sterling's companies. A Chicago student tweeted, "Laila Brooks is my hero," and it was retweeted over 4,000 times. But for every story of support, there was another post accusing her of playing the race card or chasing clout. Vanessa fed those flames in quiet ways. A comment here, a leaked detail there, telling anyone who'd listen that Laila wasn't even that good a server and probably planned it. Laila kept her head down at work, but the pressure was building. She started checking the locks twice before bed. She stopped answering calls from numbers she didn't recognize. One night, a loud bang shattered her calm. A brick hurled through her living room window. Maya screamed and ran into her arms. Glass glittered across the floor like ice. Laila called Javier, and he was there within 20 minutes, still in his bar apron. "I'm staying here tonight," he said. No room for argument. They played card games with Maya until she fell asleep on the couch. When he left in the morning, he said, "You've got more people on your side than against you. Don't forget that." That day, Laila checked her phone and saw a petition titled, "Stand with Laila Brooks," 75,000 signatures. Reading the comments, "We've got your back. You're not alone. We see you," was like pulling in a lungful of fresh air after days underwater. It didn't erase the fear, but it reminded her why she had spoken up. The truth was bigger than Sterling, bigger than the threats, and bigger than the lies. Somewhere in all of this, she could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet. Fame, Laila quickly learned, didn't feel anything like glory. It felt like walking through a street where every window was lit and every shadow might be hiding someone waiting to trip you. By the second week after the video, she couldn't step into a grocery store without someone recognizing her. Some would smile warmly, pressing a hand to her arm and saying, "We're proud of you." Others would mutter as she passed, not loud enough for her to catch every word, but just enough for her to feel the chill. Online, the swell of support kept rising. Photoshopped posters with her quote, "You can't buy my dignity," were popping up in feeds from Chicago to Los Angeles. But so did the hate. Trolls sent doctored images of her with crude captions. One even messaged a threat that mentioned Maya by name. That one sent Laila straight to the police station. They took the report, nodded gravely, and promised to look into it. But she knew better than to wait on promises. At Celestine, the tension had thickened. Half the staff seemed protective of her. The other half seemed to resent the attention she brought. Vanessa Holt, reinstated after a supposed sick leave, wasted no time stirring the pot. One afternoon before service, Laila overheard her on the phone in the staff lounge, voice dripping with faux concern. "I just hope she remembers she's here to serve, not to star in a movement." That night, the consequences of Vanessa's bitterness arrived in the form of a tabloid reporter at her door. The man didn't just know her address. He had details about Maya's school, about the nights Javier had stayed over after the brick incident. She didn't need to guess how he knew. The next day, Evelyn Ward called her into her office. "Vanessa leaked your address," Evelyn said flatly. "I've suspended her." Evelyn's voice held the same quiet authority that had once run a Michelin kitchen. "You are part of my team, and my team stays safe." To back that up, she hired a security guard to watch Laila's building at night. Laila felt both gratitude and the awkward weight of being the one everyone's watching. She wanted to blend back into the fabric of the restaurant, to just pour wine and explain menus. But there was no going back. Sterling's retaliation had shifted from public statements to private pressure. Evelyn told her that several of Celestine's suppliers had called to say they'd been contacted by friends of Sterling urging them to cut ties. Investors, too, had hinted that Laila's presence was bad for business. Evelyn had stared them down. "You want to leave over this? Go. My values aren't negotiable." Laila knew that stand was costing Evelyn money, but Evelyn wouldn't discuss it. "You focus on your daughter," she'd said. "I'll focus on keeping the lights on. At home." The sense of siege grew. The security guard at her building's door was polite, but made her feel like she was living in a story she didn't sign up for. Maya, perceptive beyond her years, had stopped inviting friends over. "It's just too noisy out there," she told her mother one Saturday morning when two women with camera phones were lingering across the street. Laila tried to keep their routines normal. Breakfast before school, homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories. But the intrusion pressed in. Even her walks to the train for work were interrupted by strangers who thought their curiosity was harmless. What did it feel like to say that to him? "Are you afraid? Do you think you'll get fired?" Most meant well, but every question was a reminder that her life was no longer private. Amid the chaos, there were still bright spots. An envelope arrived at Celestine addressed simply to Laila. Inside was a handwritten letter from a high school senior in Detroit. "My teacher showed us your video in class. I didn't think people like me could speak up like that. Thank you for proving me wrong." That letter went on the refrigerator next to Maya's latest drawing, but even as support rolled in, so did the pushback. Blogs tied to Sterling's business allies published hit pieces calling her a professional victim and claiming she had a history of workplace trouble. Entirely fabricated. She'd never been fired, never had a formal complaint against her. Yet here it was, circulating like it was fact. Daniel Pierce caught her in the hallway one night before closing. "I don't know how you're still standing," he said. "Half the time I'm worried you'll walk in here and tell me you're done." Laila smiled faintly. "If I quit now, they win." Then, one evening after the dinner rush, she came home to find a package at her door. Inside was a framed print of her own quote, beautifully typeset, with 75,000 signatures surrounding it. The petition supporters had sent as a gift. She stood there in her small living room, holding it like something fragile, and thought about all those names. They weren't just clicks on a screen. They were people who believed her voice mattered. That night, she slept a little deeper. Still. The next morning brought another jolt. Sterling's lawyer sent a formal letter to Celestine threatening to pursue all available remedies if the restaurant continued to employ and platform her. Evelyn brought the letter to the staff meeting that afternoon and read it aloud. "Let me be clear," she said to the room. "We don't bow to bullies here. Not in the kitchen, not in the dining room, and not in the press." Then she looked directly at Laila. "You have this entire house behind you." The staff clapped. Not all of them, but enough that the sound filled the room. Laila left work that night feeling the smallest sense of steadiness return. The storm hadn't passed, but she had weathered enough in her life to know that sometimes just making it through the day was a victory. And as she walked the snowy streets of Chicago's Loop toward the train, she thought of something her grandmother used to say, "When they come for your dignity, you plant your feet." She had, and she would again. The offer came on a Thursday afternoon, in the middle of the lunch shift, when Laila was balancing two trays and trying not to think about the latest smear article Sterling's allies had posted that morning. Daniel appeared at her side and murmured, "Evelyn wants you in her office, now." She set the trays down for another server to run and walked back, her apron still tied, heart ticking faster. Evelyn was there behind her desk, but she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, in a soft navy suit and that unmistakable warm but commanding presence, was Michelle Obama. For a split second, Laila thought she'd stepped into a dream. "Laila," Evelyn said, smiling, "Mrs. Obama has something she wants to discuss with you." Michelle stepped forward, her handshake firm, her eyes locking onto Laila's in a way that made her feel seen and weighed in the same instant. "I've been following what happened," Michelle said, "and I want you to know, you handled yourself with courage and grace. That's not easy when the world is watching." Laila's throat tightened. "Thank you." "Ma'am." Michelle explained she was launching a new initiative called Equity Now, A $3 million campaign with 12 partner organizations to combat workplace discrimination and promote dignity in service professions. We need someone to be the face of this, she said plainly. Not a politician, not a celebrity, someone who's lived it, who understands what it means to stand up in the moment. Laila's first instinct was to shake her head. I'm just a server. I've never done anything like that. Michelle smiled gently. Exactly. You're real. And your heart is what we need. Evelyn added, you'd still work here, but you'd also speak, travel, help shape the message. I'll adjust your schedule. Laila's mind spun. The idea of stepping into such a public role terrified her almost as much as the threats she was still getting. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted. Michelle leaned in slightly. No one's ever ready to lead, but moments like yours, they make leaders out of ordinary people. Before Laila could answer, Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her jaw tightened. Sterling, she said. He's offering to pay off one of our major suppliers' entire year of invoices, on the condition they stop delivering to us if we keep you on. Laila felt the heat rise in her chest. He's still coming after me? Evelyn nodded. And he will until he thinks you're done, which is why you should do this. Turn his attack into a platform. Javier, who had been quietly listening from the doorway, stepped in. Laila, you've already been leading. Whether you like it or not, might as well make it official. She thought of Maya, of the night they'd huddled under a blanket after the brick shattered the window, of the petition signatures, of the student in Detroit who called her a hero. She took a slow breath. All right, she said. I'll do it. Michelle's smile deepened, and she clasped Laila's hand. Good. You're going to change lives. The rest of that shift blurred. Word spread quietly among the staff, some excited, some skeptical. Vanessa overheard in the prep kitchen and, true to form, found her own way to sour it. That night, she met Sterling's assistant at a wine bar and fed him details about Laila's new role, smirking over her glass. Thought you should know, she said, pretending it was a casual aside. Sterling, upon hearing, saw it as a challenge. Within 24 hours. More anonymous calls came to Laila's phone. One email simply read, "We know where your kid goes to school." Evelyn responded by arranging a driver for Laila and Maya until further notice. The next morning, Michelle's team held the first planning call for Equity Now. They wanted to launch in 6 weeks, starting with a major event at Celestine's ballroom, the same room where Laila had stood her ground. The symbolism wasn't lost on her, as she listened to plans for partnerships, social media outreach, and training modules for managers across the country. She felt both daunted and determined. That evening, after Maya went to bed, Laila sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. On the first page, she wrote, "Why I'm doing this." She listed 5 reasons: Maya's future, her own dignity, other workers who can't speak up, proving Sterling wrong, and honoring every person who had told her thank you since that night. A week later, she met with Evelyn and Michelle again to map out her speaking role. "We'll need you on panels, in interviews," Michelle said, "and we'll need you to tell your story the way only you can." Laila thought about how to shape it, not as a viral moment, but as part of a longer journey through every slight, every dismissal, every moment she'd been told she wasn't enough. She didn't want pity, she wanted change. Meanwhile, Sterling escalated his campaign. His PR team fed quotes to business magazines suggesting Celestine was imploding and that Laila had created a hostile environment. None of it stuck. Evelyn's reputation was too solid, but the noise was constant. One evening, when she was leaving after a meeting, Laila caught Vanessa watching her from across the dining room. Their eyes met for a second. Vanessa looked away, but Laila saw something she hadn't before, a flicker of uncertainty under the disdain. That night, Javier walked her to her car. You know, when this is all over, he said, he's going to wish he'd never said a word to you. Laila half laughed. Let's hope so. As February wound toward March, the pieces of Equity Now came together. Flyers, sponsorships, speaker lineups. Laila practiced her speech in the quiet of her living room, Maya sitting cross-legged on the couch, offering feedback like a tiny coach. Say the part about dignity slower, Maya suggested one night, so they really hear it. Laila smiled, making a note, but the threats hadn't stopped. One evening, Evelyn called to warn her, Sterling just tried to buy out one of our major investors to pressure me into letting you go. Laila's jaw clenched. What did you say? I said we're not for sale. It was in that moment Laila realized. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was part of something bigger. A current that had started with one sentence in a dining room and was now pulling in voices from across the country. And if Sterling thought he could drown her out, he was about to find out just how loud that current could get. By the time March rolled in, the air in Chicago still held that sharp winter bite. But for Laila Brooks, the cold was coming from somewhere far more dangerous than the wind off Lake Michigan. The closer the Equity Now launch date crept, the harder Conrad Sterling pushed. His smear campaign had shifted into overdrive, blogs, social media accounts. Even a concerned citizens group that was nothing more than a shell for his PR firm began churning out lies. That Laila had staged the incident for fame, that Evelyn was exploiting it for profit, that the video was edited to make him look bad. None of it stuck with people who knew the truth. But lies have a way of leaving a stain even after they're washed away. And then came the night the danger stopped being digital. Laila and Maya had just finished dinner when the sound of shattering glass ripped through their apartment. Not a brick this time, but the small explosion of a Molotov cocktail hurled at the front porch. The flames licked at the doorframe, smoke curling under the threshold. Laila grabbed Maya, heart pounding, and ran them out the back while a neighbor called 911. The fire was contained quickly, but the message was clear. Back down, or we'll make you. The police took statements, their voices clipped, their eyes darting toward the reporters gathering across the street. Javier arrived before the fire trucks even pulled away, his face pale under the streetlight. You're staying with me, he said. Laila didn't argue. That night. Maya slept in the guest room of Javier's small apartment above a corner grocery store, while Laila sat at the kitchen table, staring at the smoke smell clinging to her coat. This isn't just about me anymore, she said quietly. Javier nodded. It's about every person they think they can scare into silence. The next morning, Evelyn met them for coffee. We'll get you into a safe location until this launch is over, she said. My friend runs a private security firm. You'll have round-the-clock coverage. Laila hated the idea of being protected like she was some fragile thing, but she had Maya to think about. All right. She agreed. 2 days later, she sat across from a CNN anchor in a brightly lit studio, her hair pulled back, her voice calm but firm. The segment had been booked for weeks, but now it felt urgent. Why not just walk away? The anchor asked. Laila took a breath. Because dignity isn't for sale. If I walk away, he wins. And if he wins, what message does that send to the next woman in my position? The clip went out to over 10 million viewers that night. Donations to Equity Now surged past 4 million in 24 hours. Support poured in from restaurant workers, nurses, hotel staff, even corporate employees who had faced their own forms of bias. But while the momentum lifted her, the threats didn't stop. Vanessa, watching from the sidelines, seemed to wither under the pressure. One evening, she knocked on the office door where Evelyn and Laila were meeting. Her voice was shaky. I need to talk to you both. She admitted that she had fed information to Sterling. At first, she said, just little things to put her in her place. but later. Things she knew could harm her. "I didn't think it would go this far," Vanessa said, eyes wet. Evelyn's face was granite. "You endangered her and her child." Without another word, she told Vanessa to collect her things. As Vanessa left, she glanced at Laila. "I'm sorry." Laila didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Word of Vanessa's firing reached the staff quickly, and for the first time, the restaurant felt unified behind Laila. Still, Sterling wasn't done. His influence began to crack when a major sponsor for one of his tech conferences announced they were pulling out, citing misalignment with our values. That crack widened when an investigative reporter unearthed emails showing Sterling had personally instructed his team to find pressure points on Laila and Evelyn. The story broke 3 days before the launch, and the tide shifted sharply. For the first time, Sterling was the one on defense in the days that followed. Laila visited Maya at the secure townhouse where she was staying with a retired security officer's family. They sat at the kitchen table together, Maya working on a story for school about a brave mama who didn't give up. Laila read the first page, her eyes stinging. "You're a good writer," she told her daughter. "I wonder where I get it from." Maya teased. That night, when Laila returned to her own temporary apartment, she wrote out the final lines of the speech she'd give at the Equity Now launch. It wasn't about Sterling anymore. It was about the people who had sent letters, who had risked their own jobs to speak up, who had told her she made them feel seen. The night before the event, she stood at the empty ballroom of Celestine, looking up at the chandeliers, remembering how she had once stood in this same room, a tray in hand, being told she didn't belong. Tomorrow, she would stand there again, not to serve plates, but to serve notice. The battle had been ugly, frightening, and exhausting. But now, with the finish line in sight, she realized something Sterling never would. You can try to strip a person's dignity, but you can't take it if they refuse to hand it over. And she was done handing anything over. The ballroom at Celestine had never looked like this before, where once there had been hushed conversations over foie gras and crystal wine glasses. Now there were rows of chairs, a stage framed with soft lights, and banners bearing the bold letters, Equity Now. 600 people filled the room. Restaurant workers in pressed uniforms, nurses still in their scrubs, business leaders in tailored suits, activists in T-shirts that read, "Dignity has no price." The hum of voices was alive with anticipation. But when Laila Brooks stepped onto the stage, the noise softened into a collective breath. She stood tall, the same posture she had that night at Sterling's table, but now without the weight of serving trays in her hands. Maya was in the front row beside Javier, her little legs swinging, clutching a notebook where she'd been scribbling ideas for her own stories. Michelle Obama sat just to their right, her smile steady, her presence like an anchor. Laila adjusted the microphone, looked out over the sea of faces, and began. "Some of you know me as a server. Some of you know me from a video. But before all that, I was a girl in Bronzeville taught that your dignity is something no one can give you, and no one can take away." She paused, letting the words settle. "I've been told I don't belong in certain rooms. I've been told my place is somewhere smaller, quieter. But I'm here to tell you, the size of the room doesn't determine the size of your voice." She spoke of that night in February. Not just the insult, but the choice she made in the seconds afterward. "When Mr. Sterling told me this place was a disgrace with me here, I could have walked away. I could have stayed silent. But silence is the soil where injustice grows." Her voice stayed calm, but the conviction underneath was like steel. She told stories of letters she'd received. A hotel housekeeper in Atlanta who confronted her boss about stolen tips. A young man in Detroit who refused to change his name on a resume to sound more acceptable. She lifted them up as proof that one voice could spark many. Equity. Now isn't just about me. She said, it's about you. It's about the next person who's told they're less than. It's about building workplaces where dignity is the default, not the exception. The applause began as a ripple, then swelled into a wave that filled the room. Michelle Obama took the stage next, her words reinforcing the mission. But it was clear the night belonged to Laila. Donations came in live on the screens flanking the stage, $6 million by the time the program ended, from small $10 gifts to corporate commitments in the hundreds of thousands. Outside the glare of the spotlight, the fallout for Sterling was hitting full force. The investigative reports had gained traction, and his companies were hemorrhaging sponsors. 2 major contracts were canceled in the same week, by the time Laila left the stage. Her phone buzzed with news alerts about his resignation from a board seat he'd held for a decade. Evelyn Ward found her in the green room, hugged her tight, and said, "You changed the story. Not just yours. Ours." Later that night, after the last handshake and the final photo, Laila walked out into the crisp Chicago air. Snow flurries drifted in the light from the street lamps. Javier and Maya were waiting for her at the curb. "Mama," Maya said, holding out a thin, stapled booklet. "I finished my story." On the cover, in careful block letters, were the words, "My hero." Laila took it in her hands, her throat tightening. "Is it about superheroes?" she asked. Maya shook her head. "It's about you, and how you didn't let the mean man win." For a long moment, Laila just looked at her daughter. The reason she'd stood her ground that night, the reason she'd taken every blow that came after. She crouched to Maya's height, the snow settling in her hair, and said, "Baby, the truth is, we both won. Because we didn't back down." They walked to the car together, Javier falling into step beside them, his easy smile back after weeks of worry as they drove through the quiet streets. Laila looked out at the city she called home, a city that could be cold and cruel, but also fierce and full of heart. She thought about the journey from a cramped apartment kitchen to a stage that carried her voice to the nation. She thought about every person who had stood up in their own way because they saw her do it first. And she knew this wasn't the end. The work would go on, in restaurants, in offices, in boardrooms, in classrooms. Some days it would be big and loud, other days it would be quiet and unseen, but it would keep moving forward, back at their apartment, the windows repaired, the locks reinforced. Laila tucked Maya into bed, from the living room. She could see the framed petition with its 75,000 names. She stood there for a while, letting the weight of it settle in, not as a burden, but as a promise that she'd keep speaking, keep standing, keep planting her feet no matter who tried to push her back. Outside, the snow kept falling, erasing footprints on the sidewalks. Inside, Laila Brooks knew her path was just beginning, because when one person stands for dignity, it doesn't end with them. It starts a movement, and this movement had only just begun. Thank you for listening to Laila Brooks' story, proof that one voice can spark a movement. If it moved you, leave a comment, like this video, and subscribe so we can keep sharing powerful stories of courage and justice. Thank you for being here.